Ladies and gentlemen, the President and CEO of the America First Policy Institute, Brooke Rollins.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being with us. My name is Brooke Rollins. I've had the unbelievable opportunity and honor to help build this America First Policy Institute over the last 3.5 years, and we're just so grateful that you've all joined us today. We have Larry Kudlow and Mike Johnson in the house, everyone. As we continue our special speaker series with two of our closest friends and two of America's finest and two of the America First leaders, House Speaker Mike Johnson and Larry Kudlow. The purpose of today's gathering is to discuss the economy and what our good friends, led by Speaker Johnson, have planned to revive it. But before I begin, I'd like to extend our thanks to the United States Secret Service and to God for sparing President Trump's life once again this weekend. Listen, I grew up seeing the country bounce back and better. Can I age myself a minute? First from Vietnam and then from Watergate, regaining its footing under Ronald Reagan and reviving its pride, restoring its military and winning the Cold War, and enjoying a generation of prosperity unlike any that had come before. I saw an America, and for those of you at my age and above, I saw an America as great as the Americans. I saw an America that worked. I saw an America work so well that its promise and its prosperity reached down into the small town of Glen Rose, Texas, population 1,200 people, where a little girl growing up with a single mom dreamed the dreams that would one day take her to the White House in the service of the only other president in my lifetime to bring that promise and that prosperity back. Fast forward to an American born in 1990 or after. These Americans matter because they're the largest generational cohorts in American history. They've seen the worst economic times since the Great Depression. They have deferred employment, they have deferred home buying, they have deferred marriage, and they have deferred having children. And for many of them, they have lost faith. Now in 2024, they're in their 20s and their 30s, and they're facing a new round of hardships and misfortunes that, for their generation, never seem to end. Inflation, supply chain blockages, out-of-reach housing prices, and rising interest rates. American cities in abrupt decay. They're tired, and they all have one thing in common. They've never seen America work, except once. They saw America work one time in their lives, in the golden, unforgettable 36 months from Inauguration Day 2017 to the world-stopping descent of the pandemic in March of 2020, when the policies, the vision, and the faith of President Donald Trump and the America First agenda made America great again. So how did he do it? How did he break the cycle of his predecessors and whoever has actually been running the United States government for the past 43 months? At its core was the departure from nearly a decade of a federal government trying to get America restarted. You see, it turned out that all it took was an administration ready and willing to let the Americans restart themselves. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was the perfect proof of concept. Cut taxes, allow the American people to have more of their hard-earned money, and the economy will follow and will boom. Couple this with energy independence and massive deregulation, and you have a formula for rising wages, lower prices, and historically low poverty levels. The record bears repeating. Household income in those 36 months rose more than $7,000 after accounting for inflation. We realized energy independence for the first time in 67 years. Every cohort saw its lowest poverty rate on record and the longest economic expansion on record, including the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. Currently, much of that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is set to expire. I'm sure our friends will talk about that today, but it doesn't have to. Fortunately, we have a speaker who understands that central to America's comeback is making the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act permanent, and he's got a plan to do it. 125 days from now, the 47th President of the United States will take the oath of office. And when that happens, hopefully a bill will be moving that will work to bring even a new and greater era of economic strength and flourishing. Today, we are privileged to have the man spearheading the effort to make that plan a reality. And I know that he and so many great patriots in the United States House of Representatives will have the full support of Larry Kudlow, Kevin Hassett, Newt Gingrich, Mike Falklander, and the entire economic team at the America First Policy Institute. I believe that I can speak for my friend Mike Johnson when I say he never planned to be Speaker Johnson, but of course, God often has other plans for all of us. I won't recite his bio because you already know it, but what I will tell you is that Mike Johnson is a great House Speaker, but he's even a better man. He is consistently principled and indefatigably optimistic, and he believes what too many in Washington have forgotten, or worse, chosen to ignore. The purpose of the government is not to secure the workings of the government. The purpose of the government in America is to defend the interests of the American people. First and foremost, our liberties. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the 56th Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the amazing Mike Johnson.
You're the best.
Thank you so much for that warm reception and for being here. It's a great honor for me to be with you all, my friends, AFPI, and to celebrate all the extraordinary work that you did during the first Trump administration. Brooke and I believe we're going to have a second administration, and so the topic of our conversation today is very, very important. It's also Constitution Day, and I, as somebody who dedicated my life to litigating and defending and trying to preserve the Constitution, this is a day of almost singular importance to me. It also, in a more somber note, I'm always of double mind on Constitution Day because September 17th is also the day in 1984 that my father was burned in an explosion on the job. He was a firefighter in my hometown, and he got burned 80% of his body, third-degree burns. It happened in 1984, and this happens to be the 40th anniversary of that tragic day in our family's lives. So I've got mixed emotions as I stand before you, but I lost my dad 3 days before I got elected to Congress, and he survived 30 years plus after the event and died of cancer 3 days before I got elected. So I feel like, especially on a day like today, he's sort of watching over me. So I don't want to mess this up, right? I was with President Trump, as fate would have it, on Sunday. Kelly, my wife, and I had diverted our plans, changed our plans for the day, and we flew to Mar-a-Lago to meet with him about a number of legislative matters and things we'll talk about today. And we arrived at Mar-a-Lago right when he did after the whole shooting incident, and we spent almost 3 hours with President Trump on Sunday. It was a moving experience. It gets a man's attention when he faces a second assassination attempt. But I will say this about President Trump. I said it on social media, and we all know it's true. I don't think there's any American in the history of the country that has been so attacked and yet has stood so strong and resolute. He's unstoppable, and I'm really grateful for his leadership and that stamina that he shows all of us. So I know you are as well. I've been traveling around the country nonstop. That's the job of the speaker in this crazy modern era. And my staff sadistically keeps the statistics. And so last week, at the end of last week, we had done campaign events and fundraising events in over 206 cities across 40 states. And the only reason that's relevant this morning is because I want to tell you that I have traveled more of the country than I ever thought would be possible. And I've met some of the greatest people in the world. We have the greatest people in the world in this country, and they're hurting right now. And you all know it. We all know it. And no matter where I go, people are longing for the success and the economic conditions that so many of the people in this room helped to provide, and that Congress worked with you all, we all worked with you all to bring about during the first administration. And everybody knows during that administration, we brought about the greatest economy in the history of the world, not just the United States. And I say that in all these rallies around the country, and people nod in agreement because they know it's true. They know that every demographic in the country was doing better. All the statistics, many of those that Brooke just recounted here and some that I'll share here in a moment, made us achieve American greatness again. And we can do it once more, and we have to, because right now we all regret, and at our great national peril, Biden and Harris have largely reversed almost all that success. They undid it in just this short amount of time. For nearly 4 years now, the Biden-Harris administration is engaged in what we know is a big government socialist experiment, and they've done it at our peril. It was always doomed to fail. Those experiments always are. But they don't look at reality all the time. And so every time we turn around, they're trying to do more of what that ideology requires. They want another government program. They want another federal agency. They want more IRS agents. They want more taxes. They want more government spending. And now candidate or comrade Kamala Harris, as President Trump is known to call her now, wants to take it to a whole different level. I mean, if you follow her around on her little campaign speeches, all she's talking about is more centralized price controls and new government spending programs, and everybody gets a car. You know, it's like Oprah's running for president. And no one's asked her how to pay for it yet, by the way, of course, and if they did, she wouldn't have a clue how to explain that. I wish somebody would give her a tough question. I wish she would do a real interview, but that's not on her agenda. And they suggest that they can spend your money better than you can and that you're going to be better off for it. And how's that working out for us? Everybody knows the results. I've been all over the country. As I mentioned, I go north, south, east to west, everywhere, and I go to the blue states and the swing districts and the places we're sometimes not expected to be. And the story is the same everywhere. We've got too many hardworking Americans that are struggling to get by. They really are, and it's real. The struggle is real. Every corner of the country, grocery bills have nearly doubled in the last 4 years. Many families are having to put their groceries on credit cards now, and they tell us about that with tears in their eyes. This is not a sustainable situation. They're resorting to extreme measures, many families now, just to stay afloat and to avoid the repossession of their cars and their homes. The website GoFundMe reported this just a while ago. Fundraising pages set up to avoid home eviction are up 40% since last year alone. I mean, this is a desperate time. And it's no surprise that rent is up 20% since Biden and Harris took office. And so college graduates have had to move back in with their parents, and young married couples are delaying the purchase of a home and starting a family. It has real-world consequences for everybody. Small business owners, meanwhile, and job creators are hurting. Every sector of the economy, they're struggling under the crushing weight of inflation and hyper-regulation. And I've met fourth and fifth generation family businesses that are on the verge of collapse right now. And you talk about the mournful mood of a meeting like that when they've been trying to sustain it, they're trying to keep their head above water, and they're just about done. And because of the Biden-Harris policies, the current forecast is really bleak. In less than 4 years, Americans have gone from the highest level of personal savings to now the lowest. Now more than half of Americans are unable to afford a $1,000 unforeseen emergency. Today, American families can only put 3% of their income into savings for those who are still trying to do it, the lowest consistent level for the past 20 years. And with those reduced savings, Americans now have accumulated far greater debt, and we all know those stories as well. The average American now faces $6,300 of credit card debt, and it mounts every day. And we're all facing the highest credit card interest rates ever and the highest levels of credit card delinquency since the Great Recession. These are real facts and real numbers that no one wants to talk about on the other side. It's no secret why Americans' pocketbooks or saving accounts are getting squeezed. For that, we can thank Bidenomics. And the head cheerleader of Bidenomics, of course, was Kamala Harris. It's her price hikes. She owns it. She co-owns the policy. She said she was the last person in the room every time when the big decisions were made. We'll take her at her word. Sorry, according to MIT economists, inflation spiked to the highest level in 40 years because of the reckless trillion-dollar spending sprees under this president and vice president. And today, all our grocery bills and utility bills and everything is painfully more expensive. Eggs are up 47%, coffee 21%, baby food and formula 30%, fuel 49%, electricity 32%. It goes on and on and on. And the prices on everyday goods are forcing the average American household to pay an additional $13,000 each year just to maintain the same standard of living that they had just a few years ago. I mentioned mortgage payments a few moments ago. They're now costing the average family an additional $15,000 per year. That's real money. And while the price of homes, which are up 39% from when Biden and Harris took office, are now putting the dream of home ownership further out of reach for more people. It's a sad situation, and it doesn't have to be like this. When it's all added up, the Kamala Harris economy, Americans have reduced savings, greater debt, higher prices, and they have fewer full-time jobs and reduced paychecks. That is not a formula for success. We cannot do this for 4 more years. From June 23 to June 24, Americans lost 1.6 full-time jobs, 1.6 million full-time jobs, and the only area where we saw job gains were in part-time work. And why is that? That's because everybody has to get multiple part-time jobs just to keep up, just to put food on the table. We've also seen median household income decrease by 4.7% since 2019. And now in every major sector of the economy, Americans are working more hours for less pay. It shouldn't surprise us, this dire situation has led to a third of Gen Z and millennials to think the American dream doesn't exist anymore. It's out of their reach. And it's caused 1/3 of recent retirees to consider returning to work just so that they can make ends meet. Whatever metric you use, I mean, we could do this all day. We all know the stats. It's inflation, home prices, the ability to retire, the level of debt, the level of savings. Americans are worse off in every measurable category. The Biden-Harris economy has not done well for America. That is the understatement of the century. And everybody works more and they get paid less. This is not a sustainable trajectory, and we can do better. It doesn't have to be this way because we know how to do it. We've already demonstrated how to do that. During the Trump administration, we saw the greatest economy because government did less, not more. Hello, Kamala, less, not more. Middle-class family income increased by nearly 6,000. Incomes rose in every single metro area in the United States. That's the first time that had happened in 3 decades. In 2019, the median family income rose 6.8%, the largest single-year increase on record. Nearly 7 million people gained freedom from dependence on food stamps during the Trump years. We stood up to countries taking advantage of us and added 510,000 manufacturing jobs for our middle-class workers. We expanded apprenticeships to more than 850,000 workers, and we had the lowest unemployment rate in a half-century. And record low rates for Black and African American workers and Hispanic Americans and people with a high school diploma. Everybody was doing better. Every demographic was succeeding. And the formula for that success was simple, and that's what we have to articulate today because that's what we have to return to. We produced energy here at home. We cut regulations. We reduced government bureaucracy. And we changed the tax code so Americans could keep more of what they earn. We did it by establishing opportunity zones and attracting companies to create jobs in underserved regions rather than overseas. Under President Trump, we unleashed the free market and the pioneering spirit of America. We got government out of the way so Americans could escape poverty and enjoy an era of prosperity. And now that we are on the eve of a new election, all those Americans who've been struggling so mightily because of the Biden-Harris economic disaster now have an opportunity. And our job is to be evangelists for that cause and that truth. We have a chance to restore liberty and opportunity and security to America, to bring back economic freedom and thriving families and small businesses and a strong middle class. And despite the fact that the big government socialist experiment has discouraged growth and innovation, I'm absolutely bullish on the future, and I believe that we can do this again. The American people are the most industrious and hardworking people on the planet. And time again, we pioneered and endured and we've rebuilt after times of great difficulty. There's a lot of parallels to what we're facing right now as what we faced at the end of the malaise of the Carter years in the late 70s. If you go back and review the history, it's pretty remarkable. We can do this if we have that kind of vision and we bring back the policies that we know that will work. The history of our nation, the secret to our greatness, is that we have that kind of spirit. We pioneered Plymouth and Jamestown in the face of tyranny. We discovered cures to polio and treatments for cancer and disease. We built the skyscrapers in Chicago when the engineering didn't exist to do that. We lit our cities with the light bulb when the world lived in darkness. We built the locomotive. We laid the transcontinental railroad. We settled the West even when it was barren. Our scientists took us to the moon with the Apollo spacecraft and into the 21st century with the personal computer. And our founders, 237 years ago today, devised the greatest governing system in the history of the world when they signed their names to that matchless Constitution that begins with the words, we the people. And as I've traveled around the country since becoming Speaker, despite this decline, I have seen this rugged, innovative American spirit, and it is alive and well. Our people are eager to create. Our factory owners want the chance. They're prepared to break new ground. Our construction workers are ready to build. They just want the opportunity to do it. Our companies are ready to develop new life-saving medicines, and we have AI that's, enhanced that so much right now. Our energy producers are poised to produce enough energy to power the country for the next 100 years and to send it to our allies around the world. If we would just stop adding new regulations that drive up the cost and get the government out of the way. Although we're on exactly the wrong track right now, we can change it, and we intend to lead just as we have done in the past. By doing a few simple things, and with Republican control of the House and the Senate and the White House again, unified government, we can introduce and pass an economic plan that will put us back on that pioneering path of liberty, opportunity, and prosperity for families around this great country. Let me give you a quick recipe, and then Professor Kudlow is going to grill me with some questions, okay? Here's what we envision, and we're working very aggressively to put together a very aggressive first 100 days agenda for the Congress and in the days beyond. We don't put the cart before the horse. We got a lot of work to do between now and Election Day, but I believe that what I'm seeing on the ground is going to happen, that we are going to have this opportunity, so we got to be prepared on day one. The first thing we want to do is promote investment and opportunity, and we do that by extending and building upon the Trump tax cuts. In 2017, we reduced the IRS's invasion into our everyday lives, and we let more of our hard-earned money be kept by those who earned it. Businesses, large and small alike, began new projects, opened new centers, hired new workers, provided better wages. All that was happening because we created the right conditions for it. Democrats, of course, want to repeal those tax cuts. They have a plan that would take more than $300 per monthly paycheck from a family of 5 starting in 2026. If we let the tax cuts expire, in my district in Northwest Louisiana, annual taxes would increase by $2,800 on average. And if we let Harris win, U.S. companies would pay tax rates at least 30% higher than any of their Chinese competitors. Tell me how that makes sense. If you look at the Biden-Harris budget that released earlier this year, you'll see how it punishes farmers, ranchers, and manufacturers with $5 trillion in additional taxes. It's foolish, and it's more than foolish, it's dangerous. The smart approach is broad-based tax policy that unleashes the American entrepreneurial spirit and encourages research, development, and manufacturing. And that's why under our plan, we will ensure that the U.S. remains the preeminent location for the investment in innovation and technology by restoring immediate expensing for R&D cost, by ensuring a strong FDII incentive to encourage U.S. ownership of intellectual property, and restoring the 100% expensing provision. And we'll keep those cuts in place to support job creation, along with the double guaranteed deduction and a strong child tax credit. But unlike the Democrats' proposal, we will ensure that our tax policy respects the dignity of work, and it doesn't pay people for staying out of the workforce. Second, that's the first thing. Second thing, we'll use our economic weight to prioritize this country. That's what America First means. It's about being a good steward of what God has given us. It doesn't mean we're isolationists. It means we're good stewards. You take care of your own house before you take care of the neighborhood, and people have lost sight of that. Gone are the days of allowing China to steal our jobs and exploit our trade deals and hollow out our manufacturing sector. It's obviously not in our national interest to rely on communists for our energy and critical minerals and pharmaceuticals. And we know it's not in our national interest to support the economy of our largest geopolitical adversary. China is almost a peer-to-peer adversary, and we've got to take it seriously. Just last week, the House passed multiple pieces of legislation to counter China's malign economic activity. 28 bills we passed through the House, 15 of them bipartisan. And we'll continue to confront China. We'll also prioritize our country again by using the tax code to secure the border and fight the cartels. The border czar, Kamala Harris, did such an extraordinary job on that task. It is a catastrophe that we will be living with for as long as any of us are alive. I think the actual number, President Trump often says, is probably close to 20 million. I think he's right. I think it's probably 16, 18, 20 million. We don't really know because they're not actually keeping the real numbers. And all those illegals who have come in have resulted in incalculable human suffering, financial cost, and all the rest of the horrors that we don't need to recount this morning. It's got to stop. In addition to securing the border, we can use the tax code to deter illegal immigration and eliminate existing loopholes that reward illegal immigration. Third, we can revive and empower our energy sector. As a Louisianian, this is near and dear to my heart, right? Under the Biden-Harris regime, we've seen the Green New Deal regulations, unrealistic EV mandates, the cancellation of the Keystone Pipeline. We've seen pauses on LNG permitting and exports, reduced oil refining capacity, and a litany of prohibitively expensive emission standards. That is maddening public policy. It's terribly destructive to our economy, and it undermines our national security. These mandates, by the way, that the government has forced on everybody, have ignored the untapped resources within our soil, and they've ignored the science supporting natural gas, and have made fueling up at the gas station and cooling or heating our homes astronomically more expensive. When we retake control of government, we're going to roll back the Green New Deal regulations and put America back in a place of energy dominance. When President Trump came to meet with the House Republicans after his first term, just a few weeks, maybe a month or so into the term, he came and had breakfast with us, and he said, oh, I'm about to do my impression, I'm sorry. I hear it comes up on me, I hear his voice in my head. He said, we don't want to talk about energy independence, energy dominance, and we were on the back row. Louisiana and Texas guys are like, yes, you know. And we did it, drill baby drill, we did. We were a net exporter, everybody knows it. Okay, fourth, we can reform our education system, but this is supposed to be a serious speech. We can reform our education system by maximizing school choice for parents and holding woke university administrators accountable. It's out of control. At the heart of the American pioneering spirit is the chance to learn so every citizen can help carry on our experiment in self-government. But we've seen how years of backfiring government programs and exploding administrator payrolls and the Biden-Harris loan cancellation gambit have only made it more expensive to get a degree. We've also seen how anti-Semitism and Marxism have overtaken our once great university campuses. We have professors who are indoctrinating our students, and they are destroying that pioneering spirit that our young people were once marked by. At the K through 12 level, woke teachers are trying to undercut the role and rights of parents and are making students less prepared for the future along the way. Parents deserve the chance to send their children to the school that best meets each child's needs. So we need to make sure parents have the proper resources and options for kids to learn and grow and thrive and become productive American citizens. Citizens who are ready to continue on our great American experiment. And finally, we can pursue again a policy of responsibility. Under President Biden, we crossed the dangerous threshold of $35 trillion in federal debt. With an interest on the debt now overtaking our defense spending, this is simply an unsustainable and, frankly, immoral position for us to be in. Under President Trump and a unified Republican Congress, as we grow the economy, we will stop mortgaging our children's future to fund today's big government bureaucracy. We will cut the wasteful Green New Deal spending and the Democrats' so-called Inflation Reduction Act that is costing twice as much as it was advertised and is sending our taxpayer dollars to China. We're going to root out waste, fraud, and abuse and improper payments within the federal government, which have grown to the highest levels ever under the Biden-Harris administration. We're going to reduce the size of the federal workforce, and we're going to root out the hundreds of thousands of non-essential jobs that exist throughout the federal bureaucracy. You've heard President Trump and Elon Musk talk about some of this. We're going to look forward to creating a faster, more efficient, and less bloated federal government. Our government is going to be a responsible government with a reduced scope and with reduced spending. We're also going to restore a government that's responsible enough to know that it can't and it should not do everything. Today, as government agencies get bigger and Washington politicians peddle the lie that government can solve every problem, we're actually at risk of creating a nation of people who actually depend on government for everything, at the risk of killing the American pioneering spirit. We know government can't instill an entrepreneurial spirit in young people. It can't inspire the strong work ethic that we need to thrive. Government doesn't teach personal responsibility, and it certainly doesn't demonstrate living within one's means. But the American people can, and families do, and that's why it's on the American people to remember the wise admonition of Ronald Reagan. Government isn't the solution to our problems. Government is the problem, and it really is that simple. So I'll just conclude all this by saying right now we have a real opportunity. Because of the failures of this current administration, this economic regime, our nation is ready for a return to sanity. And the people in this room are the ones who can help deliver that. And for months, I've been concluding all these political rallies around the country by explaining this very, very important reality. And this is how I summarize it, and it resonates with people because they know intuitively it's true. We're not in a battle right now anymore just between Republicans and Democrats. In fact, I addressed this a little bit in my speech at the convention. The way I see this, by my own observation, and I'm sure the way many of you see it as well, we're not in a battle just between R's and D's. This is a battle right now between two completely different visions for who we are as a nation and who we're going to be. This is for all the marbles. And we're conservatives, you know, and I ask these large crowds all the time to just think about that. What does it mean to be an American conservative today? What is it we're trying to conserve? I believe, and I talk a lot about what I call the 7 core principles of American conservatism. I think it boils down to individual freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. And under those things, there are subcategories of each one. But what we're trying to preserve, what we're trying to conserve is the greatest nation that has ever been. It's not even close. You can't debate it. We're the most free, most successful, most powerful, most benevolent nation that has ever been. And the reason we are is because we're built on these very firm foundations that rise up from our Judeo-Christian heritage. All those things are in jeopardy right now. The principles that we're trying to conserve, the foundations of the nation, are under direct assault by a rising element of people, some of whom are being elected to Congress and some of whom are running for the highest positions in the land, who have a totally different vision. They don't revere those founding principles, they disdain them. And they want to replace them with something else. That really is the mission. They really are Marxist. They envision that America would be, instead of what we are, this great constitutional republic with this matchless constitution that we celebrate today. They envision instead that we would be some sort of European-style socialist Marxist utopia. And everybody in this room knows that is a dangerous fool's errand. I think that, I try not to over-spiritualize everything, okay? But I don't believe God's done with America yet. And I believe he's going to give us another chance. And I believe we're going to be able to preserve what is the last best hope on earth. Lincoln said it first, Reagan used to remind us, and we all need to remind ourselves that that's what this is about. So by God's grace, we're going to get a chance to do it. I'm very bullish on November. I actually do believe we're going to get unified government again, and we're going to be ready to turn that engine right back on, and it's going to be because of the extraordinary work of the people in this room and all your colleagues in Congress. So thanks so much for the opportunity, Brooke. I hope I didn't go too long. I'm so grateful. Thank you.
You know, Mr. Speaker, as you were speaking, I went back to the year 1766, not because you were putting me to sleep, but I was...
You sound like a founding father.
Yeah, no, I mean this sincerely. I talk sometimes about, in 1766, George Washington was a businessman. Thomas Jefferson was a teacher. James Madison was a 13-year-old student whose parents thought that he may never amount to anything because they wrote this in their journal because he was so shy. Thomas Jefferson's girlfriend had just broken up with him. He was 19. He was writing about that in his journal for his best friend. I say all that because they were just a group of ordinary Americans who 10 years later declared independence from the largest power the world had ever known. And it is ordinary Americans with a pioneering spirit that you just discussed that founded this country and I believe will save this country. So thank you for being one of those pioneers. Thank you. Before we bring out the one and only Larry Kudlow, a couple of introductions that I failed to do at the beginning, so forgive me, but really important is the incredible team. Our former Secretary of Homeland Security, currently our Executive Director and head of our border work at AFPI, who you'll hear from at the end. The amazing Chad Wolf is here. Thank you, Chad. Former chief economist at Treasury under Secretary Mnuchin in the Trump administration, and now our AFPI chief economist and vice chair of our economic work with Larry, Mike Falklander. Thank you, Mike. Former Attorney General and currently chair of our Center for Law and Justice at AFPI, Matt Whitaker. I think you're, where's that bald head? I think you're in the room. Thank you for being here. We love you. Ken Blackwell, former Ohio Secretary of State, one of the world's leading election integrity experts, is here. Ken Blackwell, thank you. Chair of our election integrity work. Governor Bobby Jindal, former governor of the great state, almost as great as Texas, Louisiana, who runs our Healthy America work. Bobby Jindal, thank you, Governor, for being here. General Keith Kellogg, head of our American security work, our national security team, former national security advisor, General Kellogg. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate everyone. Talk about ordinary Americans meeting the moment and being called for something. I'm so grateful for all the incredible people. Those are some of our chairs and vice chairs, but so many of our amazing staff that are here today and that make the work possible at AFPI. Continue to be overwhelmed at the honor of working with all of you, so thank you. I mentioned in our opening remarks, and even the speaker talked a little bit about the light that shined, I think, in the last administration under President Trump. Talking about many Americans today have really only seen America and the American dream work once in their lifetime. For those old enough, like myself, who've been around a little longer than that and saw it work another time under President Reagan, there is often conversation, but a lot of you may not realize that there's really one man who bridges the Reagan to Trump years, and that's Larry Kudlow. Listen to him laughing. The one thing, well, I think President Reagan and President Trump probably shared a lot, and if President Reagan were still alive today, they would have many fun conversations, but one thing we know they shared, and that was listening to the one and only Larry Kudlow. Larry has spent his entire career championing the idea that the American economy cannot truly prosper without growth. In every senior staff meeting in the West Wing, it would always end with Larry talking about being growthier, which we all loved and giggled a little bit at. The outline of his public biography would suffice for the record of multiple men of great high achievement in our country. He was one of Ronald Reagan's economists in OMB, then, of course, President Trump's National Economic Council director. Today, we properly know him as America's economist and the host of the #1 rated business show on TV, Kudlow. Most importantly, though, for those that know and love him, is Larry's character. You know a man best when he ascends to a position of power similar to you, Mr. Speaker. When those men ascend and women to a position of power, that's really when they show their true character. And it turns out that Larry is exactly as he always has been and always was: smart, visionary, funny, kind, and a pathological optimist who is needed more today than ever before. Please help me welcome to the stage the one and only Larry Kudlow.
Good heavens. Thank you, Brooke. Mr. Speaker, my honor to participate today. I never met Jefferson. I knew Madison very well. Okay. On a very serious note, so I saw you on Fox's morning show the other day talking about Mr. Trump's life being saved again, being providential, and God protected him twice. I want to ask you, Donald Trump is going back out on the campaign trail today. He will be in Michigan, and then tomorrow he will be campaigning actually for your House seats in Long Island. It's very important. But my bigger point is, how is it possible, what has transpired, that there has not been a presidential order to give Trump full presidential protection? How is this possible? I'm outraged by this.
We should be outraged, and we're making every demand for that to happen. The Secret Service, as you've seen reported, suggests that they have a manpower shortage. And look, this is about allocation of resources. I was talking with Chad Wolf about this, who had a lot of experience over Homeland Security, and the challenges are there, but they must be met. The last director of the Secret Service, the one that resigned right after the Butler, Pennsylvania debacle, had said on video that her primary responsibility was diversity in her employment rank. And one has to wonder whether that has something to do, some connection with the lack of personnel that they've been able to recruit and train over the last couple of years. It's a serious problem. It must be addressed. I'm not so sure it's a funding issue, but Congress will be willing to do what's necessary.
It's a political issue.
It's a political issue.
It's a political issue, and there is a person who can make this happen at the snap of the fingers. I mean, Harry Truman used to say the buck stops here. His name is Joe Biden.
Yep.
All right, now, I don't know Kamala Harris's role in any of this. I don't even know who's running the country right now. Right. That's one of the great mysteries. But I am really, look, I had two senators on our show last night. I had Tommy Tuberville and I had Rand Paul, okay? Rand Paul actually is the ranking oversight in the Senate over Homeland Security. I point at my pal Chadwell. Both of them think there may well be another attempt on Trump's life once you let the cat out of the bag, if it were. So I'm just saying, what is Biden waiting for? Manpower, I don't believe that. Reallocate people, money, you're going to, I mean, have you talked to the president? You are the Speaker of the House. Who is going to force him to make this decision?
I will go stand on the doorstep and stomp my feet until he does it, but they don't let me talk to the president very often. That may not be a big surprise to you all. We communicate through staff. It's a pretty sad situation, and in fact, it's a pretty scary situation. But look, Congress is, we have a task force that was already investigating the Butler, Pennsylvania lapses in security. We're going to change the emphasis of that to have both events investigated, but we all know the problem, it's a lack of leadership, right? And it goes all the way to the top, and so you'll see us demanding that this week. We've got to protect our 45th president, who I believe is going to be the 47th. He's the most threatened person on the planet. He has to have the protection that he needs, and we're going to make sure that happens.
And I just want to add one thing. I do not regard this as a partisan story right now.
Shouldn't be.
I mean, it shouldn't be. This could easily happen to a Democrat. Ms. Harris is on the campaign trail, too. Lord knows this is a very strange period, not an altogether happy one, as you outlined in your excellent speech. I'm just saying somebody has to... someone in the media has to catch up to Joe Biden if he surfaces someplace and ask him, why haven't you made the order to give Donald Trump full presidential protection? That's all. Just ask him. I mean, he might have an answer.
Well, that's right. And if it's a manpower shortage, then we will rely on the local and state law enforcement who could partner and help and fill in the gaps. Whatever's needed, we'll reimburse them for their services. But Governor DeSantis was suggesting that in Florida, you know. We'll do what's necessary to protect our leaders. It's a basic function of the government.
All right. Well, I just thought I'd put that out there. The other thing I wanted to ask you, you did mention this in your talk about peace of strength. There's a very, very good column by my friend Walter Russell Mead in today's Wall Street Journal. He's a very smart guy, foreign policy expert. And his title of the column is U.S. Shrugs as World War III Approaches. And essentially, it's a discussion of the unholy alliance between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. It's also a discussion on the report of the Commission on the National Defense Strategy, which is a bipartisan commission, as I'm sure you know. We do not have deterrence. We have appeasement. Sanctions have been lifted on these enemy countries. Tariffs may be called for. Mr. Trump, I think, would use tariffs for non-trade purposes, but we don't know that yet. The military budget has declined in real terms for a number of years right now. So with respect to peace of strength, Mr. Mead suggests, and I think you hinted at this in your excellent talk, at the moment we have neither peace nor strength. What are we going to do about it?
He's right. We have to have a total refocus. It's about prioritizing spending. We're at the most dangerous moment since World War II. I don't think there's any dispute about that. And you're exactly right, and he's right. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea are coordinating together because you see a moment of opportunity. We projected weakness on the world stage for the last 4 years, and it's gotten us into this terribly dangerous situation. I just, last weekend before last, I had to fly. The terribly ill-timed G7 speakers meeting was in Verona, Italy. It's the only international trip I've made as speaker because I don't have time to do it, but I could not be there because we're the United States. And so our allies are there and they're waiting, and you have a sense of the importance of the United States generally, but when you go into a forum like that, when you're with allied nations, you realize how important America is. And Reagan used to remind us, I think it was Pope Pius XII who said after World War II, the leadership of the free world was placed upon the shoulders of the United States. We carry that responsibility with all the burden that comes along with it. But if we're not strong, and if we do not project strength, and we do not send a chill down the spines of our adversaries, then freedom is endangered all around the world. A strong America is good for the whole planet. How do we fix it, Larry? We got to get Donald J. Trump elected president again, okay? They fear him, and our allies respect him.
And we will have to increase defense spending.
Yes.
Which is dropping below 3% of GDP.
Yes.
As I said, when I was a child, as Reagan's assistant budget director, it was about 6.5% of GDP. He had built it all the way up because of what Carter had done. And I'll just add, since we're quoting scripture here, did you just quote scripture?
I always do. I'm sure I
thought you
probably did.
I'm not that good at quoting scripture, but Walter Russell Mead's much smarter than I am, and he concludes his piece today, the prophet Ezekiel, whom I've never met. The prophet Ezekiel spoke about the duty of the watchman on the city wall to sound the trumpet when enemies approach. Now that is one heck of a relevant quote.
Well,
from
you're
the Old
acting
Testament.
as an Ezekiel, and so is he, and we do need watchmen on the wall because these are dangerous moments. But look, I believe we can return to the principle of peace through strength, and I believe that will be good. Our allies will respect us, our enemies will fear us, and as President Trump rightfully said on the stage of the convention, we didn't have all this under my watch, right? You didn't have Russia invading Ukraine and Iran and its proxies attacking Israel. You didn't have China with all of its provocations and, buying up farmland next to our military installations. I mean, none of that stuff happened on Trump's watch because he was a firm hand at the wheel, and that's what we need again, desperately. Imagine Kamala Harris as the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military. It's inconceivable that we would be in that situation. So we got to fight harder than we ever have.
Did you see the movie, Reagan?
I haven't seen it yet, but we're screening it for all members Monday night.
You better
in the
see it.
Congressional Auditorium.
I mean, you got to see it.
I haven't had time for a film yet, but I can't wait. I can't wait.
I double as a film critic also, but you really should see it. It's.
I probably shouldn't say this publicly.
I don't know Dennis Quaid. I've never met him. I have talked to him by phone. I know John Voight very well.
Yeah, sure.
Who plays the mythical KGB retired agent. Anyway, it's worth seeing, if nothing else. Because
well, we've invited Dennis Quaid to join us for the congressional screening Monday night. I think he's trying to make it, so you should come and visit with him. It'd be awesome. Yeah.
I'll accept the invitation. Just saying. Back to business here. Vice President Kamala Harris has the speech she gave before the Democratic convention speech, which Newt Gingrich thinks is the more important of the two speeches, and I tend to agree. And you mentioned big government socialism several times in your speech today. It's a $2 trillion spending package without a single pay for, okay, number one. Price controls on groceries and food and maybe others. We looked at that, by the way. The margins for the food and grocery business are less than 1%, the profit margins. I mean, if you want to profit, you want to go after somebody, go after NVIDIA. They have a profit margin of about 40%. I don't want to go after any of them because I don't believe in price controls, but I'm just saying to blame grocers is absolutely crazy. $25,000 of free money for housing will just raise the price of housing. I think you mentioned that in your speech. And I wanted to ask you not only your overall sense of that package, which I think says a lot and hasn't been given enough visibility, but with regard to all of the various increases in child credits and unearned income tax credit, are there work requirements? I think not, but you're the speaker. I'm just a I'm whatever I am. I work for Fox, fabulous Fox Business. But really, are we ponying up more and more money with fewer and fewer work requirements? So basically, the government is in the business of paying people not to work.
That's what it looks like. I mean, and that's their ideology, and that's what Marxists do. I mean, President Trump labeled her as a Marxist in the debate. That was not an epithet. That's an actual description of her philosophy. And so none of this should surprise us. Now, I don't know the details about her plan. I mean, she doesn't either, by the way. Whoever drafted it, she couldn't answer any of these questions. But that's where all of this is headed. The idea that they would do price controls, they would blame the grocery stores for the cost of your groceries is madness. It's a blame-shifting game. That's the other thing that Marxists do all the time. Socialists, they want the government to control everything, and they blame the producers. And it's crazy. We want government price controls. We want federal bureaucrats in Washington determining what the cost of eggs and milk is in your local store. It's crazy. The reason the costs are so high is obvious. It's because of their drunken spending habits and the regulations they placed on every industry. It costs more to transport goods to your grocery store because of their crazy Green New Deal mandates and all the rest. I mean, they create the recipe for the economic disaster, and then they blame it on the people who are trying to keep the economy going. It's really cruel. It's very immoral, and that's why we got to stop them.
There's a big section in there about lawn care. I don't know whether you're familiar with it.
Lawn care?
Lawn care.
That was my first business,
When
actually.
well,
It
you
was.
and she
I
may
might
have-
go back to it soon. I'm not sure.
well, this interview she had with the local affiliate in Philadelphia was all about lawn care, but I digress.
Sure, she's an expert in the subject.
I want to talk about something else, student loans. You're a constitutional lawyer, scholar. Did I miss something, or did the Supreme Court say the president does not have the authority to cancel student loans? I'm not a lawyer, Lord knows.
They have no regard for what the court says. They don't respect it, and these are all political ploys. But this is the idea that you would shift the cost to people who chose not to pursue a degree. Somebody goes and gets a $200,000 master's degree in European poetry or something. To say that we're going to make moms and dads who didn't go to school, who had to go work hard and they're trying to feed their family, that they should pay for that is again, immoral. Everything that they're proposing is. We got to make sure people understand, because they don't, Larry, as you know. You don't just wave away the debt. It doesn't disappear. You shift it to everyone else, and it's wrong. And once people understand that, when they're made to understand it, I explain it in terms, when I talk to college students, university students, young people, I say, imagine we all went to dinner tonight, and you're trying to, you're trying to live on a budget, and you decide to order the less expensive entree, and you drink water for the meal, and you try to be a good financial steward of your limited resources, but all your friends drink and order the most expensive wine and the most expensive item on the table, and then the bill comes, and they say, let's all divide it equally. How do you feel about that? Okay, well, that's Kamala Harris's economic plan, right? If you're on board for that, then go vote for her. If you're not, if you want fairness, if you want to reward financial responsibility and stewardship, then you need to be thinking on our side. I will say this. One of the reasons I'm so optimistic about this election cycle is that I've been traveling the country nonstop, and I believe that we are going to see, when the math is done post-election, that we're going to have a demographic shift in the electorate this time. I believe we're going to have a record number of Hispanic and Latino voters, and Black and African American voters, and the Jewish community is so energized for our side. People are fed up with the way things are. They're fed up with the cost of living and the rising crime rates and the open border and the weakness on the world stage, and they're looking for solutions. And so we have candidates who have the right answers to all the great challenges, Larry. We know the policy prescriptions, and when we produce that in the right, we present that in the right tone, it makes a world of difference. So that's our burden right now, all of us. Our responsibility is to make sure we're talking about this. Don't assume that people understand these basic truths anymore, because they don't.
Look, there's roughly, it's either 1.6 or 1.7 trillion dollar loan portfolio. It's sitting in the Department of Education in its entirety as a result of some Obama regulatory changes. I looked at this when I was at the NEC. There are no people in the education department that have ever done any credit work or income analysis, no credit analysis. So it's in the wrong agency. So I guess one thing I'd ask you, if you're able to, if you have the levers of power to do this, number one, can we move the loan portfolio out of the education department? At the very minimum, put it in the Federal Financing Bank run by the Treasury. They know something about workouts. That's a possibility. And number two, why not return to private lending where you have banks and other non-bank lenders who do know something about creditworthiness, credit analysis, and how to read an income statement. I mean, Obama said no more private lending. It strikes me that was an enormous mistake and one of the progenitors of this whole catastrophe.
Yeah, of course. And anytime you take the free market components out of something, the costs are going to go up. And we have these universities that have not been good stewards of those resources at all. In fact, after the rise of the anti-Semitism and all the madness that we've seen exposed now on these campuses, we're looking very closely at these billion-dollar endowments that they have that they're allowed to keep tax-free. We're looking at, the student visa program. If you, by the way, if you're a young aspiring terrorist in some Middle Eastern nation, you don't get to come here and come to our university campuses on our dime and terrorize your Jewish classmates, right? Like, that's, hello, that shouldn't be allowed. We're looking at all the funding streams that all these universities get, and the reason the cost of education has skyrocketed is because the government has intervened too much and done all this. That's what makes the cost go up, and frankly, the quality go down.
And on the subject of DEI, which you also mentioned in your speech, as you know, nearly all of the spending programs passed in recent years. Now, Ms. Harris was the deciding vote in the $1.9 trillion, whatever it was, American Relief Plan in 2021. That was one of the precursors of the inflation, and she was the deciding vote in the misnamed Inflation Reduction Plan. That was another inflationary bill. On the other hand, in those bills and other bills, including the CHIPS bill, including the infrastructure bill, there were DEI regulatory specifications throughout those bills. There's a story that runs, it's pretty well out there now. For the Federal Communications Commission, let's see if I get this right, 40-some-odd billion dollars was appropriated to the purposes of connecting rural broadband and so forth. We looked at, I had those accounts at the NEC. I would have known how to spend $40 billion. But the point is, they haven't spent a nickel. Not one nickel has been spent of that so-called $40 billion coming out of that bill because they're not meeting all of the regulatory, including the DEI specifications. And cable providers and other service providers are just throwing up their hands so we can't play because we can't do this.
It implodes on
$40 billion.
itself. Yeah.
So not a nickel's been spent. I know the one about the electric chargers. They haven't spent even $7 billion? No, or something like that. Anyway, no electric charge. But this is another one. Either you change the regs, just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Just get rid of it.
Well, that's what
save taxpayers a nickel.
That's what we will do. They have infused ESG,
Promise?
DEI, all this nonsense into all the government programs, so they don't work, and it implodes on its own weight, and that's a completely foreseeable outcome of this nonsense. Look, when you're talking about lending and retirement accounts, under the Trump administration, there were some great rules made to prevent all that. The Biden and Harris administration reversed it. When you go to a bank, you don't want a liberal bank or conservative bank, an activist bank, a social justice warrior bank. You want a good bank. You want ones that will handle your money right.
No,
You want a fiduciary. You don't want a social justice warrior. They're trying to infuse their ideology and their woke left policies into everything, and it destroys everything that it infects. We have the evidence now to prove that. These are not theories anymore. We can show that these programs don't work because of their madness.
Well, the other part is, it's worth a try that obligated but unspent funds can be completely rescinded. I think you mentioned the stupid IRA bill.
Yes.
That could be up to $1 trillion. The student loans, that could be $500-600 billion. You add it up, it's real money. You're going to need the money because I'm going to get to Trump tax cuts 2.0 in a minute. But these things, if it's obligated, if it's authorized but not spent, right? Take it out.
Exactly.
Pull it back. Boom.
And what we talk a lot about is if we get unified government again, we want to be very aggressive. I think we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with the overturning of the Chevron doctrine to claw back Article 1 authority, speaking of the Constitution, to the legislative branch. And we work on that very aggressively. And also, we need to authorize before we spend. That's the way this is supposed to work. Congress hasn't done that in a long, long time. So you can save a lot of taxpayer funds if you do it more responsibly. We have aggressive plans to do that.
You know, if you don't, we're going to sick Elon Musk on you.
No, I had Elon in my office 6 or 7 weeks ago.
He's
He came
ready.
sit down. Oh, he's ready to roll.
He's ready.
Yeah,
He's got itchy
motivated.
fingers. That's what we need, itchy fingers. Drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill. You have a good bill, H.R. 1, which the House has passed. The Senate never passed it. That's too bad. Just as a point, my pal Faulkner here in the front row, when Trump goes through this, he should do better on the explaining. So if you do the permitting reform, okay, or redo, because we had one federal decision, that was an NEC account also. But, energy costs permeate the entire economy. That word permeate, which is a Faulkner word, said on a terrific TV show I know of. But in all seriousness, that's what could actually bring prices down.
Yes.
So if you permit more and you produce more, say you go from 13 million barrels a day, where that was the peak 4 years ago. They're back to 13 million, big deal. They should be at 16 million barrels a day or some such thing. If you do that and the price drops back to, let's say, $40, $45, I have a list, I'm not going to bore you with it, but there's 200 or 300 items of ordinary consumer goods, healthcare goods, all kinds of things whose price would fall as the price of petroleum and related, like petrochemicals. All that stuff would fall. There you go.
Yes.
Right.
We should permeate every area of the economy.
Yes.
With our energy supply. Look, it is maddening public policy to turn off the spigots, and that's what we've done. I confronted President Biden myself personally about his executive order to pause LNG exports, for example, and this has been reported, so I'll just tell you, it's already public, but I confronted him. I said, why would you do that? You're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine because our European allies have to get their natural gas and energy needs from Russia instead of us. They desperately want it. I've spoken to them. Why would you do it? He said, I didn't do that. I said, yes. Yes, you did. And this is just a few weeks after the executive order, and he tried to argue with me that it didn't happen. And he said, oh, you misunderstand. That's just all I signed was an order to conduct a study on the effects of LNG. I said, no, sir. I'm from Louisiana. The export terminals are in my state. That's not true. I'm not sure he actually knew what he was doing there, Larry, which is back to the question earlier, who's running the country. It's pretty frightening. But it's had untold disastrous economic and national security effects and implications. And yes, it permeates it, and energy policy is at the center of our economic strength, and we've got to turn it back on, and energy dominance is the buzzword.
Did you ever ask him why he relaxed the oil production sanctions and shipping on Iran, which has gone from foreign exchange, I don't know, less than $1 billion worth of foreign exchange to 70, 80 billion dollars. It's all oil money. It's all oil production money sold to China. Or did you ever ask him if he's thought about China right now? China, which is buying the oil from Iran, okay, most of it, half of it, more than half of it, and buying oil from Russia. China is basically financing 2 wars against the United States through its oil purchases, all right, which were supposed to be sanctioned. Now, I know somebody that would slap a whole lot more tariffs on China if they ever pulled that kind of trick. But basically, did you ever ask him about, does he have any sense of what China is doing, even though it never sees the light of day? Whenever they have these, they're sending another group over there now. I don't know what they do. I mean, I was in a trade group. We won several times. Lighthizer and Mnuchin were running it. We actually got a deal. I don't know whether they enforced it or not. But the point is, does he know? Does he understand that? China is financing 2 wars with oil money against the United States.
I wish we could get those answers, and I wish they would come to the table and have thoughtful discussions with us, but that doesn't happen. It hasn't happened for 4 years because they're pursuing this agenda, and it's terrible for the country. And so that, look, we have to defeat them at the ballot box. We have to win back the levers of power because it's too dangerous. As I mentioned, these two completely different visions. We will lose the country if we don't get this back in our hands, and we're going to be very responsible for it. But this one's for all the marbles, and everybody knows it.
All right, last one. I'll spare you. So I've never met a tax cut I didn't like, ever.
Me too.
That's pretty much my history. It's part of being growthier, and I am a supply sider. So we have I'm calling them tax cuts 2.0. We will extend, Mr. Trump wants to extend the tax cuts. He wants to reduce the corporate tax to 15%, which, by the way, he's right. That was the original plan that we all did back in 2015, was a 15% corporate tax cut, which would help raise real wages. He also wants the tax-free tips. He also wants to waive the tax on Social Security benefits, as you know. More recently, he wants to waive the tax on overtime. So that's good, and it'll make the economy growthier. We should be growing at 3-4% instead of 2%, all right? When you go through, I've talked to Steve Scalise about this. Just want to get your quick take. You don't have to get bogged down. You're the speaker, not the green eye shade, but you're going to go into reconciliation, right? So that's going to be the method, I assume. And reconciliation will include spending cuts and the rescissions that we were hinting at before. But you can also go through tax expenditures and what we call base broadeners to have a more efficient, less complicated tax code. Would you be one? So as I see it, growth, spending reductions, and maybe base broadening. I mean, simplify the code, which is a very popular thing among Americans, in order to, to try to somehow finance all this.
Yes. I mean, you and I come from the same school of thought and same school of economics. I believe in all those principles, and simplifying the tax code is...
You've never met a tax cut you ever
Never.
hated.
Never.
I'm with you.
Yes.
I mean, I don't, yeah.
I mean, I
We
genuinely
should spend
believe
our
in it.
own money.
That's right. What a concept.
Not let them spend it.
That's right. But if you limit the size and scope of government, you bring in a pro-growth economy with the principles that we've discussed, and you do regulatory reform, which I think is such an important part of it,
Good.
right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they've got to go together. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was a phenomenal achievement, and it did so much good for the economy. But it was the regulatory reform that accompanied that was really the secret sauce, I think. And President Trump wants to take a blowtorch to the regulatory state, and I want to help him hold it. I mean, this is we have big, aggressive plans to do that. But again, we've got to have the levers of power. But I do think we use the tax code to incentivize growth, to reward hard work, to let hardworking families thrive again. We know the formula. It just takes political will to do it. And I think we're going to have a large enough group to do that. And I think we're going to have, the majorities in both chambers, and we'll work with President Trump and all of you, the administration, to make this happen.
Speaker Johnson, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Speaker Johnson and Larry, for just really a great and informative discussion. We appreciate you both being here. We know how busy you are. And it's really my pleasure to be able to be here with two founding members of the America First Policy Institute, Brooke Rawlings and Larry Kudlow, and of course, my friend Speaker Johnson, who I got to know very well during my time at Homeland Security. And let me thank everyone for being here in the audience, those on the live stream. And before we conclude today, let me just leave you with a few parting words. The conversation on rebuilding a robust economy and fostering prosperity for all Americans doesn't end here. The team at the America First Policy Institute continues to fight every day to return policies that put the American worker and the American family first. At AFPI, there's one question that drives our work day in and day out, and that is what is best for everyday Americans, not the political elite. So we'll continue to support the hardworking men and women who are the backbone of our nation's prosperity, American workers who are driving our country forward, teaching the next generation, protecting our communities, pioneering medical innovations and advancements, and much, much more. But as Larry and Speaker Johnson just discussed, we can't champion the spirit of the American worker without an economy that works for all Americans. And that's exactly what AFPI Center for American Prosperity, led by Larry aims to do every single day. Speaker Johnson has also put American workers first as he continues to lead in the House, and we are proud to stand by him and partner with him as he continues that very important mission. So together, we'll continue to advance public policy that defends American workers, their families, promotes growth, that uplifts the forgotten communities, and puts American needs of American citizens first. Thank you again for being here today, and God bless.